Long before Rome ruled the Mediterranean, before philosophers changed the way humanity understood the world, before the Olympic Games became a global tradition, and before Alexander the Great built the largest empire the world had ever seen, there was a rugged land of towering mountains, scattered islands, and restless seas. A land where no single king ruled for long, where rival cities constantly competed for power, where alliances shifted as quickly as the tides. At first glance, it seemed destined to remain divided forever. Yet from this fractured landscape emerged one of the most influential civilizations in human history. Its people would redefine politics, transform philosophy, revolutionize warfare, create masterpieces of art and architecture, and leave behind ideas that continue to shape our world more than 2,000 years later. But none of this happened overnight. The story of ancient Greece is not simply the story of Athens, or Sparta, or even Alexander the Great. It is the story of a civilization that rose, collapsed, reinvented itself, defended its freedom against impossible odds, and ultimately carried its culture across 3 continents. This is the complete history of ancient Greece. Long before the famous city-states of Athens and Sparta appeared, another civilization flourished across the Aegean Sea. On the island of Crete, the Minoans built magnificent palaces decorated with colorful frescoes, established vast trading networks, and dominated maritime commerce throughout the eastern Mediterranean. For centuries, they became one of Europe's earliest great civilizations. But history rarely stands still. Around 1600 BC, power gradually shifted north to mainland Greece. There, among steep mountains and fertile valleys, a new civilization emerged: the Mycenaeans. Unlike the peaceful image often associated with the Minoans, the Mycenaeans built their world around warriors, kings, and fortified cities. Their greatest stronghold was Mycenae itself, protected by enormous stone walls so massive that later Greeks believed only mythical giants could have built them. Inside these fortresses lived powerful rulers surrounded by gold, weapons, and symbols of royal authority. Their wealth came from agriculture, trade, and conquest. Their society was built for war. Across mainland Greece, rival kingdoms competed for influence, prestige, and territory. Among these legendary rulers, one name would echo through history more than any other: Agamemnon. According to ancient tradition, he united the Greek kingdoms and led a massive expedition against the wealthy city of Troy. Whether every detail of the Trojan War truly happened remains uncertain. Over centuries, history and mythology became inseparable. Yet archaeology suggests that a prosperous city once stood where ancient Troy is believed to have existed, and evidence indicates that violent conflicts likely took place there during the late Bronze Age. For generations, stories of Achilles, Hector, and the famous wooden horse became part of Greece's cultural identity. Poets preserved these tales, artists celebrated them, and long after the Mycenaean kingdoms disappeared, their legends survived. But while later generations remembered heroic victories, reality was becoming far less glorious. Around 1200 BC, catastrophe swept across the eastern Mediterranean. Great kingdoms collapsed, trade routes disappeared, entire cities burned. Writing was forgotten. Across mainland Greece, one Mycenaean palace after another fell into ruin. No single cause explains this collapse. Historians continue to debate whether foreign invasions, internal conflicts, natural disasters, climate change, or a combination of all these factors brought an end to the Bronze Age world. Whatever the cause, one thing is certain. Within only a few generations, the civilization that had dominated Greece for centuries had almost completely vanished. The magnificent palaces stood abandoned.
Royal dynasties disappeared, knowledge was lost, and Greece entered one of the most mysterious chapters of its history. For nearly 400 years, darkness covered the Greek world.
Yet history has an extraordinary way of beginning again. Slowly, almost quietly, small farming villages began to grow. Communities expanded. Trade gradually returned. New generations built homes upon the ruins of older civilizations. Out of centuries of uncertainty, Greece was reborn. This new Greece looked very different from the kingdoms that had come before. Instead of one centralized monarchy, hundreds of independent city-states emerged across the mainland and the islands of the Aegean. Known as Polis, these communities governed themselves. Each had its own laws, its own traditions, its own army, its own ambitions. Some became wealthy through trade. Others relied on agriculture. Many competed fiercely with their neighbors. Yet despite their rivalries, they all shared a common language, common gods, and a growing sense of cultural identity. Among these city-states, two would become the most famous: Athens and Sparta. Separated by only a few hundred kilometers, they represented two completely different visions of what Greek civilization could become. Athens embraced commerce, naval power, education, and political experimentation. Over generations, reformers such as Solon and Cleisthenes gradually weakened the influence of powerful aristocratic families and expanded the role of ordinary citizens in government. The result was one of history's earliest democracies. It was far from perfect. Women could not vote. Neither could enslaved people or foreigners. Yet the revolutionary idea that citizens could directly participate in governing their city would influence political thought for thousands of years. Sparta chose another path. Its society revolved around discipline, duty, and military excellence. From childhood, Spartan boys entered the agoge, an unforgiving system of education designed to transform them into elite soldiers. Individual ambition meant little. Service to the state meant everything. One city valued debate, the other perfected warfare. Together, Athens and Sparta became the two great powers of Greece. As the city-states prospered, Greek sailors pushed beyond the Aegean. They established colonies throughout the Mediterranean and the Black Sea, from southern Italy to the western coast of Asia Minor. These settlements spread Greek language, religion, architecture, and commerce across thousands of kilometers, connecting distant communities through a shared culture. Despite constant competition, there were also moments of unity. Every 4 years, athletes from across the Greek world gathered at Olympia. During these sacred games, warfare temporarily ceased. For a brief moment, cities that had fought each other on the battlefield competed instead through strength, endurance, and skill. It was a powerful reminder that, despite their political divisions, the Greeks belonged to the same civilization. If you're enjoying this journey through history and want to explore the civilizations that shaped our world, consider subscribing to History Unsealed. Every subscription and every like helps us continue bringing these stories to life with the depth and cinematic quality they deserve. Now, the Greek world was flourishing, but beyond the Aegean Sea, a new power was rising. An empire unlike anything the Greeks had ever faced. And before long, everything they had built would be put to the ultimate test.
By the beginning of the 5th century BC, the Persian Empire had become the greatest power on earth. Stretching from Egypt to the borders of India, it ruled millions of people under the authority of a single king. To the Persians, the divided Greek city-states seemed small, fragmented, insignificant, easy to conquer. They were about to discover how dangerous a free people could become when faced with extinction. The The first great confrontation came in 490 BC. King Darius I launched an invasion across the Aegean, determined to punish Athens for supporting a rebellion within his empire. His army landed on the plains of Marathon, expecting a swift victory over a much smaller enemy. Instead, thousands of Greek hoplites charged forward. Protected by bronze armor and fighting shoulder to shoulder in the disciplined phalanx formation, the Athenians overwhelmed the Persian army. Against every expectation, the greatest empire in the world had been defeated. But Marathon was only the beginning. 10 years later, a new Persian king arrived, Xerxes. Unlike his father, Xerxes came not simply to punish Greece, but to conquer it. His invasion force was unlike anything the Greeks had ever seen. An enormous army marched across the Hellespont, while a massive fleet sailed alongside the coast. For the first time in their history, the survival of the Greek world itself was at stake. Realizing they could not survive alone, rival city-states made an extraordinary decision. They united. Their first stand came at a narrow mountain pass called Thermopylae. There, King Leonidas of Sparta and a small Greek force prepared to delay the Persian advance. For days, the narrow pass prevented Xerxes from using his overwhelming numbers. Wave after wave of Persian soldiers crashed against the Greek shields, again and again, until betrayal changed everything. A local Greek revealed a hidden mountain path that allowed Persian troops to surround the defenders. Knowing the battle was lost, Leonidas ordered most of the allied army to retreat. He remained behind with his Spartans and a handful of Greek allies. They fought to the last man. Their sacrifice did not stop the invasion, but it bought Greece something even more valuable: time. Time to prepare, time to unite, time to survive. After capturing Athens, Xerxes believed victory was finally within his grasp. But the fate of Greece would not be decided on land. It would be decided at sea. The Athenian general Themistocles lured the Persian fleet into the narrow waters of Salamis. There, the enormous Persian navy lost its greatest advantage. Greek triremes rammed enemy ships one after another, turning the strait into chaos. By the end of the battle, the Persian fleet had been shattered. Without control of the sea, Xerxes could no longer sustain his invasion. The following year, the remaining Persian forces were defeated at Plataea. Against impossible odds, the independent Greek city-states had preserved their freedom. Their victory would shape the future of Western civilization. Had Persia succeeded, the history of democracy, philosophy, science, and countless ideas that emerged from Greece might have unfolded very differently. Instead, a new era was about to begin.
With Persia defeated, Athens emerged as the leading power of the Greek world. Protected by its powerful navy and enriched through trade, the city entered an extraordinary age of prosperity. Under the leadership of Pericles, Athens transformed into the cultural heart of Greece. Magnificent temples rose above the Acropolis. Among them stood the Parthenon, a masterpiece dedicated to Athena that became the symbol of Athenian confidence and achievement. Yet Athens became famous for far more than its architecture. Its streets filled with artists, historians, scientists, and philosophers whose ideas would echo across the centuries. Among them was Socrates. Rather than teaching people what to think, he challenged them to question everything. His method would inspire generations of philosophers, including Plato and Aristotle, whose ideas continued to influence education, politics, and ethics even today. The arts flourished. History became a discipline grounded in observation rather than myth. Medicine, mathematics, and astronomy advanced through reason and inquiry. For many historians, this became known as the Golden Age of Greece. It was one of humanity's greatest explosions of intellectual creativity. But beneath this remarkable success, old rivalries had never disappeared. As Athens expanded its influence across the Aegean, many city-states began to fear its growing power. None more than Sparta. The ally that had once fought beside Athens against Persia now viewed it as its greatest rival. In 431 BC, the Greek world descended into the Peloponnesian War. For nearly 3 decades, Greeks fought Greeks. Cities were destroyed, trade collapsed, famine spread. Disease swept through Athens, claiming thousands of lives, including Pericles himself. When the war finally ended, there were no true victors. Athens had lost its empire. Sparta had exhausted its strength, and the Greek world stood divided once again. The civilization that had defeated the greatest empire on earth could not overcome its own internal conflicts. While the city-states struggled to recover, a new power was quietly rising to the north. Macedon. The kingdom of Macedon had long been dismissed by many Greeks as uncivilized. But under King Philip II, everything changed. Philip transformed Macedonia into the strongest military power in Greece. His army was disciplined, innovative, and built around the formidable Macedonian phalanx, armed with the long sarissa spear. In 338 BC, at the Battle of Chaeronea, Philip defeated the combined armies of Athens and Thebes. For the first time, most of Greece stood united under a single ruler. Yet Philip would never fulfill his greatest ambition. Before launching his invasion of Persia, he was assassinated. His 20-year-old son inherited the throne. Many believed the young king lacked the experience to preserve his father's achievements. Instead, he surpassed them all. His name was Alexander. Crossing into Asia, Alexander carried the war directly into Persian territory. Victory followed victory. At the Granicus, at Issus, and finally at Gaugamela, where the mighty Persian Empire collapsed before him. The empire that had once threatened to destroy Greece now belonged to a Greek king. But Alexander was not content with conquering Persia. He marched through Egypt, where he founded the city of Alexandria. He crossed Mesopotamia, advanced through Central Asia, and reached the distant frontiers of India. In little more than a decade, he created the largest empire the world had ever seen. Yet Alexander's greatest achievement was not measured only in territory. Wherever his armies traveled, Greek language, philosophy, architecture, science, and culture traveled with them. New cities became centers of learning. Ideas flowed between civilizations. Greek culture blended with Egyptian, Persian, and Eastern traditions. This new world became known as the Hellenistic Age. Its influence would endure for centuries. But in 323 BC, while in Babylon, Alexander died unexpectedly at just 32 years old. His empire soon fractured among his generals. The political empire disappeared, but something far greater remained. Greek civilization had expanded beyond Greece itself. Its ideas had crossed continents. Its culture had become international. Its legacy had become permanent. Ancient Greece was never the largest civilization, nor the richest, nor the most united. For much of its history, its greatest enemies were often its own divisions. And yet, few civilizations have shaped humanity more profoundly. The principles of democracy, the pursuit of philosophy, the foundations of science, the traditions of theater, the Olympic Games, the study of history itself, all carry the unmistakable imprint of ancient Greece. Empires rose, empires fell, kings came and went.
But the ideas born in this small land of mountains and islands proved stronger than any army. More than 2,000 years later, the greatest Greek conquest is not found on an ancient map. It is found in the world we live in today. Thank you for watching History Unsealed, and this was the complete history of ancient Greece.